Zdravo everybody, and welcome to Belgrade. I'm standing now on the Brankov Most, the Brankov Bridge that connects Novi Beograd, New Belgrade, to Stari Belgrade, Old Belgrade. Today we're going to take a walk in the new part of the city. We're going to understand how a city that only 20 years ago that was destroyed by war reconstructed itself into the beautiful capital city and one of the biggest and best cities in the Balkans today. If that sounds interesting to you, come along. So here are our first look at the Brankov Most, connecting the new side to the old side. It sits on the Danube River, that great river that cuts from Germany all the way to the Black Sea, going through all these beautiful Balkan capitals. There are many rivers that connect this side, but this one was one of the first and is one of the most important for the city. Why I stopped here is to show you this old decrepit building. It's really actually quite beautiful, probably built over 100 years ago, and now sits in ruin, you know, with a great access to the water. These buildings are really important because during the Balkan War, kind of the Yugoslav war that kind of tore this region apart, a lot of these buildings were bombed out during the NATO bombings, and they haven't been repaired. You can see on this side, some of the buildings have been repaired and are beautiful and glorious again, but all over Belgrade, you're gonna find these decrepit buildings that just haven't gotten the love that they need, the reconstruction. It's kind of cool because they make these into bars, into cafes, and they repurpose them in nice ways. They keep the facade and the outside. But we're headed to New Belgrade. We're gonna see what's going on. We're gonna see what they built in the 70s and the 80s when they were constructing a bigger city. What did the socialists build and all that good stuff. Wow, it's so incredibly hot out here. But it is Belgrade in the summer. It's gonna be like really hot when you guys come here, but it's a good place. So this is one epic place I wanted to take you on our start to our journey in New Belgrade, which we're still heading this way. And then there's a place called Zemun, which is an old city that used to be on the Danube River that we'll finish at. And so it says, Ja volim Serbia, Serbiu. So I love Serbia. And this massive building behind me is the Federation Palace of the former Yugoslavian times. This was the building, the headquarters where all the government practices of Yugoslavia happened, at least here in Belgrade. They got the big fountain. They've got this big socialist monstrosity in that very brutalist style that they really loved in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Probably more about the 70s. Now today, I'm not sure what they're using it for, to be honest, but they've got some very nationalist vibes. They got all the Serbia flags, and then back over here, they've built a brand new Orthodox cathedral and Republika Serbia right on the road. It's beautiful. Let's get closer. I'm gonna do a big video on Yugoslavia, so you guys can stay tuned for that. But these central buildings and these central power hubs for these greater federations like Yugoslavia and of course the Soviet Union, they put a lot of effort into these buildings, and they really built them both for function specifically. You know, it's obviously not the most beautiful building, but they would also import these architects and these builders, these new design thinkers of these people really thought how to use the space and how to make it efficient, how to make it easy to build, how to make it repeatable, and of course how to make it functional. So I always find these old socialist buildings incredibly interesting. And if you go more this way, you'll see they call these blocks. So when the socialists used to build these new housing areas, they used to establish these blocks where people could live in these high-rise buildings that were built cheaply, effectively, that were supposed to give people, especially from the countryside, the ability to live in the city, and they were supposed to be repeatable, simple, and decently comfortable. So you can see a huge housing block here, another one here. New Belgrade is filled with these ones from the 70s and the 80s during the Yugoslav times. While Yugoslavia was, of course, in Eastern Europe and was a socialist state, it had some very big similarities, but also some very big differences from the Soviet Union. They did do a lot of intellectual sharing and borrowing, but there was some distrust between them, and they were not necessarily allies. They were mostly neutral from each other. They were doing lots of similar things, but obviously in a different style. One thing they certainly did import from the Soviet Union were these block houses, and we're gonna get close to one so you guys can see it better. So here we have our traditional block housing unit from this Yugoslav times. We also have this one, which is maybe a bit newer or maybe the same time period. This one is very special in particular because this is called a Brezhnevka in Russia. Brezhnev was one of the Soviet Union leaders, and he revamped what it meant to have housing. There was this idea that housing was only supposed to have 5 floors because then they wouldn't have to build an elevator. But Brezhnev thought, what if we built them taller, we put in elevators, and then we basically kept everything enclosed in this one area. So oftentimes, and let me go down here without dying, oftentimes they would have a place for people to, you know, exercise, a place for people to park their cars, stores, cafes, and the whole bottom floor of these sometimes were different shops that people could use. Same idea over here with this big Coca-Cola sign. This actually reminds me a lot of what you see in Romania. And here you go, block 30, BLOK 30. And a lot of these seem to have their own kind of, not nationalism, but their own identity. I see a lot of these houses with different sorts of versions of kind of, not gang signs, but kind of identifying factors. So here you've got the Serbian eagle with the coat of arms, and we've got something that says Akab. I have no idea what that means, but Akab. I think I stumbled on maybe one of the most brutalist areas of the city. We've got this kiosk looking thing with Beoblov at the top. We have this massive complex of absolutely brutalistic style buildings. Let's take a look. All right, after an hour-and-a-half walk, we are at the granddaddy of Soviet brutalist style buildings here in Belgrade. This is the Gen X Tower, or Gen X Tower, I'm not sure. This is like really old school, late 70s, concrete, brutalist. You've got the tower. It used to be a restaurant up here. I'm gonna see if we can try to go up. There seems to be some sort of elevator. It's wild looking. I don't know why I love this stuff so much. It reminds me maybe of like Fallout 3, you know? You've got kind of these block houses, you have these buildings that are built. They look like something straight out of a movie. Everything's kind of decrepit, falling apart. And then you've got, of course, a defunct fountain over here. No longer works. A place where people used to sit back in the day. You got some block housing in the background. This is it. This is Eastern European socialism right here. Living, breathing. This is dying a little bit, but it's great. So I just went inside to see if I could go up the elevator, and I just had the most weird and semi-racist experience I've had in quite a long time. So there's a guy sitting at the counter in this very 70s looking room, and I asked him if I could go up, and he said, no, the building's closed. He said, you know, if I wanted to buy the building, I could. And then he said he was talking about how after everything collapsed during the end of the Yugoslav era, and Milosevic, who was the last Yugoslav leader, kind of there was a lot of corruption, and so he said he was a socialist, and then he told me, or then he asked me where I was from, and he said something negative about Americans, so I said Canada, and then he goes, oh, genetic modification, and I said, okay, I'm not sure what that means, but this building's giving me the exact vibe I was expecting. Very, very strange. I mean, how weird is this place? It's just like falling apart, but people are still clearly living in here. And it seems like there used to be things that were open here, but now they're not. If we go through here, oh, awesome. Whoa. Crazy. Whoa. This is literally like something out of a Blade Runner movie. I love it. So just a short walk from our Soviet Yugoslav 1970s nightmare building. We're in Zemun. Zemun is a beautiful little city on the banks of the Danube, It used to be a separate city, now it's just basically a suburb of Belgrade. But it feels like a million miles away from where we just were in the block housing, really gray 1970s era buildings. This is like a small little village, and it's got a very famous tower, but you guys can see, look at how beautiful these buildings are in the very classical Eastern European style. It feels like I'm in Prague or something. It's very pretty. It's actually a little bit more quaint and a little bit more pretty than anywhere I've been in Belgrade, to be honest. Truly, I think Serbia is a lot of things, but being basic and easy to understand certainly is not one of them. And so here you guys have beautiful architecture. It's got this pink style. This is like something you'd find in Prague or in southern Germany. Oh, and look at this beautiful clock tower from 1870. It's really really unique that you can find so much varied architecture, and it just shows you how diverse the Balkans is, how diverse Serbian history was, and also, of course, the impact of the Yugoslav era on everything from architecture to how the people acted to all that good stuff. Behind me here is the Gardoš Tower, also known as the Tower of John Hunyadi. If you guys remember from last video, John Hunyadi was a very important Hungarian noble and military leader who was very kind of influential in repelling the Ottomans. So what we've got here, the Gardoš Tower, this was built in the late 1800s, and this was built as a memorial to 1,000 years of Hungarians living on this kind of Central European plains region. In 1896, this tower was built during the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and this region, which you can see here, was not Serbia, but was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, especially Zemun. So apparently there are 7 of these kind of monuments built to the Hungarians in this region, and they're not all towers, but they are important for the Hungarian people. But it's just kind of funny because this is no longer Austro-Hungary, and one of the most important kind of artifacts that was built to the Hungarian people is actually here on the banks of the Danube in Serbia. The reason they named this fortress after John Hunyadi, of course, also is because around the Gardoš Tower there is this fortress which is from the 1400s. So it is feasible that John Hunyadi may have came here to oversee the occupation and the defense against the Ottomans. And this place is just so quaint. I mean, they've got churches, they've got, this is like whatever you picture about Eastern Europe and about Serbia, about the Balkans. This is just probably not what you're picturing, and it's so pleasant here. This might be my favorite place I've been in the city so far. The amazing part about this view here is that you can see the generations and the change of Belgrade over a period of time. So you can see the red roof housing of Zemun, you can see the block housing over here and over there from the 1970s, from the 1980s. You can see the bridges, you can see the boats on the water, and more importantly, you can see the St. Sava Cathedral, the second largest Orthodox cathedral in the world. It's really impressive to see how a city can change so much over the last about 120 years, and how the Belgrade today really reflects all of those different people who had their hands in developing this city over that time period. So now I don't think there's anything left to do but sit on the banks of the Danube, grab a cold Serbian beer, and enjoy the sunset. I hope you guys enjoyed this tour of a little side of Belgrade you probably didn't know was possible. This is a great place for a day trip. So if you are in Belgrade, I would definitely come out here. There's a whole bunch of cafes here. I'm not sure if you can see it because it's a little dark, but I will be sitting at one of these having a nice frosty Serbian beer. If you guys enjoyed this episode of Tales from the Road, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know. We're slowly growing, but you know, just trying to get these videos out there, man. And there's a lot of Serbia content coming up. So if you're interested in the Balkans, Serbia, the Yugoslavs, socialism in Europe, this is the place to find it. And thank you guys for stopping by, and I will see you on the next video. Živeli.